Hey there, and welcome back to the show. Today we have Sherisse Hawkins, the CEO and founder of Pagedip. She is a builder, learner, risk taker, motivator, rainmaker, speaker, and corporate escapee. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Nice to be here.
Corporate escapee, that's the first time I've heard that phrase.
Oh, I love that phrase. It's like perfect description. I didn't understand that I really, in my heart of hearts, should have been an entrepreneur from day one. So I spent many years not doing that and working for some really large companies. So I worked for as a Walt Disney Imagineer and designed theme parks and roller coasters around the world.
Did
And
you
then
get fun
fast,
Disney perks?
I'm sorry.
Did you get fun Disney perks?
Oh my gosh, there are fun Disney parks. Yes. The best one is that you can go to the park whenever you want. You can go to
That's a
whatever
pretty
park
nice
you
one.
want. Yeah, yeah, and bring three of your favorite friends. Um, and then I stayed in sort of like the telecommunications and media area,
Hmm.
and I found myself at Time Warner Cable at the right before this, and managing a big team and doing all the cool stuff about deploying products with them before they got sold to Charter. Um, and some people ask, why did you start a company after you worked in corporate, or do people leave corporate? And I think that both have value. So I'm
Hmm.
not one of those people that says, oh, you should never work for corporate, or you should always be an entrepreneur. There's things to learn and experiences to have and benefits of
Definitely.
both. And so I feel lucky to be a corporate escapee.
What was the point? Was there a turning moment in your career where you're like, I'm ready for the next adventure? Or was it more of a gradual thing?
It was not gradual.
Okay.
And I'm just going to trust you and share this, even
Okay.
though I don't think I've told anybody this. I'm a person that likes to start things. I like the risk of failure. I like building things.
Hmm.
And I've been at Time Warner for almost 10 years, like 9 years. And we had started from scratch. We had built
Hmm.
something and it had been deployed to 15 million subscribers or whatever. But it got to that steady state point.
Hmm.
And I realize I am not good at steady state. I like like I said, the risk and the reward and trying to figure it out. And once it's more or less figured out, um, I just couldn't stand it. I felt it was claustrophobic, even
So you're a
though
0 to 1 person.
exactly. And I
Okay.
didn't
Okay.
know that. I didn't know
Okay.
that. And the funny thing about working at Disney is that it's all project based. And so they say, we're gonna put a new park in this city in this many years, and then you move on. And so I
Hmm.
probably got spoiled by that job of always starting and then moving on to the next thing that you have to start.
So what triggered your journey into entrepreneurship? Like what made the click in your brain where you're like, I know who I am now or what I need to do to satisfy? Like, was there a triggering event?
Um, the real triggering event is like what can I start? I didn't have like
Oh,
I have to do this particular thing, but very quickly thereafter I realized we don't communicate very well. We don't
we
communicate
don't.
very well in a digital space, and there's all these fantastic tools and resources that could have just been placed together and have a better experience. Someone told me that innovation isn't really thinking of something new; it's thinking about new and novel ways of putting existing technology together. And so, like this, we don't communicate very well, and we certainly don't respect how text and media can live together in
Hmm.
harmony. And so that was the inkling of the idea, and it kind of kept morphing from there. The first thought we had was not the money making thought, but the impetus for that was really some frustration we had as the core team.
Is this a problem you experienced that you wanted to solve personally, or was this like a scenario you heard from a friend or a colleague?
A little bit of both, a little
Okay.
bit of both. And then in corporate, I felt like we were always chasing our tail of trying to keep material up to date or understand what people were needed. Um, I call it bombardment. We often, if something's, the more complex something is, the more we think we can clarify it by just producing more. So it's like, I'm going to throw a PDF at you and I'm going to,
Hmm.
share this presentation with you. And here's a video off of YouTube. And oh, by the way, take this webinar. And after a while, you're just kind of like, stop throwing things at me with out of order and these.
Hmm.
So that it was that experience, both as a consumer and also I've been one of those people that've been lobbing stuff at individuals. I thought this has got to stop. There's got to be a better way.
So how did you go about the brainstorming process of discovering what this better way is?
Oh, that's an interesting question. A little bit of I like to tinker with stuff, so we started playing around with what could it look like. And one of the first incarnations of the product was actually in ebooks in the EPUB file. And I remember we went to my co-founder and I went to a conference, and we had this working prototype on an iPad, and we thought this is pretty cool. We've blended all these components together. We're no longer playing bombardment with people. And we talked to a pretty well-known person in the EPUB space, and we said, well, we've got this way of blending text and media together. And he goes, well, that's not possible. And Alex pulls out the iPad from his,
Hmm.
literally from his back pocket, and he goes, well, it looks kind of like this, don't you think? And the guy was like, whoa, what did you do? How did you do
Hmm.
that? And so that, I'll never forget that moment of, there was just this pride and excitement of someone telling you that it's not possible. And we didn't know that it wasn't possible, so we just kept chipping away at it until we got it to work.
I'm surprised someone can fit an iPad in their back pocket.
It was an iPad. It was an iPad Mini
Okay.
back in the day. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. And that was the first incarnation of an MVP. Is that right?
Right, right. Yeah, and we went on to. Well, the next funny part of the story was we felt like we were going to sell to a particular group, and we were at a book show, and we had a future customer, come to us and say, we've talked to Apple, and we've talked to Microsoft, and we want to, have this experience, and we think you guys are close to that. And
Hmm.
I remember thinking, we're not going to be an enterprise. I just left enterprise. I don't want to do that. And they showed us the way that there was a much bigger need in enterprise with
Hmm.
corporations than there was in the sort of like EPUB land. So thanks to them, we kind of found the right footing.
So would you say a bulk of your customers now are in the enterprise space?
Oh yeah, yeah. Not a
Okay.
single. We don't even. I couldn't even tell you about EPUB file structures anymore. That was, but it's just
Enterprise
a
is
step
definitely where the
along.
most money is.
Yeah, yeah. But it's a step along the journey, and you can draw the straight line through your experiences in hindsight. But
Yeah.
as you're heading out into the wilderness, you don't know what piece of advice or what exchange is going to really set you on the right course.
Right. Were there specific key interactions you had with people that really pushed either the idea or the strategy or the execution along at like an exponential rate?
That first customer challenged us, and some of my favorite features was feedback from them that just said, well, could you do this, or have
Hmm.
you thought about that? And they came at it from this really core need and frustration of what hadn't worked for them in the past. um, and so I think there's only one time that you can have that beginner's mind and see something for the first time and say, oh, what about? And even now, I think you can get too close to your own product where you don't
Hmm.
see it from that perspective. So each time we have a new interaction, we're training somebody. I always ask the question, just kind of give me a running dialogue of what you're experiencing, what you expect. And the gems are there. They're not from our team's fantastic, but it's not that we sit around and think up the most brilliant ideas. It's when the need of the customer and the possibility come together.
So landing enterprise clients is definitely a non-trivial challenge. How'd you get that off the ground? Because I think a lot of people either we've interviewed in the past or we are going to interview are facing that challenge of trying to sell to enterprise, but facing a lot of friction. Do you have any tips for them?
Understand the procurement process ahead of time. There are things like buying cycles, and even though I've been from enterprise, I didn't really remember that because I was a technologist. I didn't really think about when we would make buying decisions or when we would so just doing a little bit of research and understanding what their buying cycles is number
Hmm.
one. Because if they're not going to buy until September, there's really no use in trying to close a deal in March. You want to have that relationship. The other
And how'd you
thing,
figure that out for a given company?
it's you can talk to other vendors of
Okay,
theirs.
I see.
Sometimes if you ask for a conversation with someone in procurement, maybe a lower level um, person, they will let you know, like, here's our
Hmm.
process, because they want to make it easier too.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't want to make it frustrating. um, and then a good friend of mine said, sell to who you know first. And so we told our friends and we told our ex colleagues, here's what we're up to. What do you think about it? And and then you've got some friendlies. So the first couple of deployments, they were a little rocky, and then they can forgive you. So that was the first step. But then after that, what we found to be really successful is what I call land and expand. So
Mm.
we get our foot in the door, have someone become really interested in what we have, and they have some successes, and then pretty soon the department across the hall, or this is before
Oh.
COVID, or next door says, "What's that? What's that all about?" And they call us and
Mm.
want to join. So highly recommend the land and expand. You've got to have an evangelist internally too. Just have to.
What percentage of your customers come from like an evangelist-like character, if you could guesstimate?
Easily more than 50%.
Okay, that's more than I
in
expected.
in corporate
Yeah, yeah, in
we're
corporate.
starting to do more like self-serve options, and we're going to be putting our product into the Salesforce ecosystem. But those first early adopters, um, and it might not be somebody that we knew directly, but it was someone that we'd had a conversation with that kind
Mm.
of got excited about it, and then started to socialize it internally. I think the idea of you walk up to the front door and you do your pitch and you convince people, and all they do is talk to you. That's not really the way corporate works.
Mm.
There's internal dialogue, and you need to have someone that's in your corner.
Do you find that you're the one who has to go out and build all these relationships, or is your team capable of also doing the same as an extension of yourself?
In the beginning, it was me, and that was another thing that I wish. There's a lot of things I would tell my former self before became a founder. And one of them is, you're going to be the sales department for a while, and I'm a technologist. I'm
Mm.
an introvert. I don't want to sell things, but you're also the best at selling because you're so passionate about it and you know
Right.
it inside and out. Now I'm so excited that we have a head of marketing, a head of sales, and oh my gosh, I can sleep so much easier now that I know that that's being covered, and I don't have to read all the contracts and
Mm.
all that sort of stuff. So, but I think in the beginning, you have to be honest with yourself that you know you got to wear a lot of different hats to get it off the ground.
So what was it like going from a more introvert heavy role into more of an extrovert heavy role? Was that a difficult transition in the very beginning?
Yes.
How do you go about it?
Another well, I think of it as putting on like my extroverted like a costume. Like I'm just gonna
Okay.
wear this for now, and I can take it off later, and I can go read my book or whatever. But I also started you're gonna think this is crazy, but I started doing improv classes.
Oh, that's not crazy at all. I've considered taking improv classes myself.
We should do it. There's a great drop in one in Boulder. When you're back in
Huh.
Boulder, we're gonna go to an improv class. And now that COVID's opened up, somehow I don't know what the magic is. There's some science behind improv.
Hmm.
Just learning how to think on your feet, learning how to pay attention to the room. There are some real business skills associated with improv. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
I was just telling my co-founder last week that once I'm back in LA, I would love to take acting classes, and I think improv is very adjacent to that
Yes.
because like I'm also by nature an introvert. I'm a former software engineer, and for the when I was in high school, I thought my future job was going to be in front of a computer for 8 hours a day with minimal human interaction. And now
And
I'm
you
like,
were okay with
and now I'm
that?
on podcasts trying to talk to people. I'm also trying to sell people for another business that we work at. It's very different, and
Yeah.
I love the ability to adapt, and I think humans are so good at adapting.
Have any of your other guests like shared a secret tip like as random as improv classes?
Um, Not yet. Although the one I had previous today was telling me how his experiences in going through the U.S. military really built him up as a person of character and integrity. And
Yeah.
I imagine that's one of the goals of the program. But he seemed like he really loved it, and that's great to hear. It's great to know the program's working for a lot of people.
I don't know if you agree, but I think one of the things about knowing that you're an introvert, but also knowing that does not mean that you cannot talk or you cannot give
Yeah.
presentations. It's just what gives you energy. And so sometimes I'll finish a day's work and just say I'm out of words for now. Like I can do other activities, I just can't talk
Hmm.
anymore. But that doesn't mean that you can't be good at those things. I think that's a myth. I think that's unfortunate that we kind of label introverts as these people that can't communicate well. We can. It's just exhausting.
Have you heard of the charisma myth?
No, tell me.
So the charisma myth is a book. I can't remember who the author is, but the idea
I'm
is that I
writing this
think they
down.
too are an introvert, and the idea that they've been trying to espouse through their books, the fact that charisma is a skill just like any other, just like a musical instrument, just like a foreign language.
Mm-hmm.
And charisma is learned through iteration as opposed to being naturally gifted at. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are some people who are naturally gifted at oration, but for
Yes.
the most part, I think most skills in life are learnable. And that's just, I mean, that's effectively the TLDR of the book.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm reading it now. I'm an audio. I'm an audiobook addict, and so
Oh, me too. Me too.
what's on your what are you reading right this second?
Right now, I'm going through Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules for Life Beyond Order and Chaos. I probably mix up the order of those words in his title somewhere. Um,
Okay, you're making me take a bunch of notes here. Charisma.
that's a sequel, though. So I would start off with his first book, the 12 Rules for Life.
Okay.
And he's kind of like an internet fatherly figure, and he just takes the things he's learned through. So he has a PhD in psychology, and he goes through a lot of counseling sessions, and he
Mm-hmm.
just takes the core themes that he's found to be universally helpful to people, or universally helpful to his clients, and he's seen them to be helpful to everyday people as well in terms of how to structure your life, how to view the world in a way that you're able to both see the dangers in the world, but also respond with, I guess, a sense of courage and responsibility. And I really like that theme.
I am excited. This is perfect timing because I literally just finished something and I was like, what am I going to download now?
I download more audiobooks faster at the rate that I consume them. I miss so one part of the things I really enjoyed prior to COVID was the fact that I had to drive everywhere. I had to drive to work, drive home, and that was just audiobook time.
Mm-hmm.
Now I literally
Mm-hmm.
drive to the grocery store and I drive home, and that's really about the bulk of my travel.
Mm-hmm.
And the store is
Mm-hmm.
like 10 minutes down from where I live, so it's not that much time to get an audiobook in.
Yes, I had the same problem. The addiction. I had to figure out new ways. So I've discovered, house cleaning. There's still places that you can put your audiobook time.
Hmm.
But I do miss the. It's the perfect combination for driving. It really is.
Do you have a favorite book or favorite audiobook?
Um. Oh my gosh, never split the difference.
Oh, that's on my to read list. Okay.
Oh God, I've read that book at least 3 times. I got the pleasure of hearing the author speak, Chris. I can't think of his last name. It's gonna be awful. Um, at a summit event, and it just blew my mind. Like the way he considers what he thinks about negotiation, how you can do that in your day to day life, and just how human minds work
Mhm.
when they're negotiating things. It's brilliant. I just feel bad that we've got to get in there or in the comments what his last name is because it's just out of my head right now.
I also know the book you're talking about, and I also remember his first name is Chris, and I cannot remember his last name as well.
Okay, we'll fix it. We'll fix it in post production, like if we have
Yes.
to.
Thanks for post production. So, what was it about that book that you really enjoyed?
Um, it just explains so much. It explains sometimes the tension that we have
Hmm.
between what our needs or expectations are in a business sense, what the other person across the table, that we might assume that we're going to argue about this point or have differences, but that's not really what's happening. And he also talks about this concept called the black swan effect. Have you heard of the black swan
I am
effect?
familiar with that. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Do you want to define it?
Go for it.
Okay. The fact that we don't, for many, many years, we thought that swans were only white. And it wasn't until someone saw a black swan in whatever country that it expanded our imagination and our awareness that there could be another version of this animal. And oftentimes with technology, with, in his case, hostage negotiation, there are assumptions of this never happens. And
Mm-hmm.
then when it does happen, it just the whole world shifts like in Doctor Strange, and you have to take that into consideration. And I think again with technology, with innovation, there's these events that happen that we didn't think were possible, and it shifts everything. So he talks about how to not have that be a blind spot, but a lot of it is really around communication, just straight up communication in a lot of different situations. It's an easy and quick read as well, which makes it fun.
I think he was like a senior negotiator for the FBI or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I am remembering
Yeah.
the right person.
Whose name we just don't know.
I'll Google it up later.
Okay. Okay.
So, I guess slight transition, but what motivates, like you're very clearly into learning.
Oh
What
my God.
motivates you to want to learn more? What's
Um,
the best part of learning, in your opinion?
that's such an interesting question. And we just did the Strengths Finder test from Gallup, and learner is my number one. So it's funny
Hmm.
that you tapped into that. There's just this excitement and wonder and possibility that curiosity, that insatiable curiosity that I think I've always had. Um, that Here's an example. When I want to relax, that's what I want to do. I want to learn. I'm trying to learn a little
Hmm.
language. I'm trying to learn a little piano, and that's how I relax.
Hmm.
And my family goes, "You're kind of weird. Like, why don't you want to watch TV or do
Hmm.
something?" But learning is really, really, it's one of my favorite things. It sounds like you fall into the same category.
I love learning. There are times where there was a time of my life where I transitioned away from listening to music while working out to listening to audiobooks. And sometimes it's hard to focus,
Yeah.
but I also feel like, oh, you're like double dipping into like two forms of productivity at the same time.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree. I totally agree.
I feel like I get a lot of dopamine hits out of learning something new, whereas
Yes.
watching TV is definitely not comparable because I feel like most of the things I see on TV, I'll probably forget in a few years' time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Going back to books, I'm reading The Art of the Impossible, and they
Hmm.
talk about the dopamine. They talk about when you have those short wins and how your brain connects new information. And there's like a chemical reason that we like that experience, and it really helped us evolve as a species. And so it's not just something that you're imagining; it's really chemically happening in your brain that makes that rewards that behavior.
Dopamine is definitely a very interesting and well-studied chemical or compound in your brain. I look forward to seeing what more discoveries will happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned reading. So reading is one of your interests. What other interests do you have outside of work?
Oh, I just got to go back to this one after COVID. I like, do you know what aerial silks are?
Yes, yes.
So I got this wild hair to start to to learn how to become an aerialist about
Hmm.
5 years ago. So it's the thing I miss the most about being in the quarantine is I don't have a place in my home that's suitable for hanging a whatever.
I don't think
Uh,
most people do.
right. So to go back in the studio and to do these cool, complicated drops and things like that, there was definitely some. I'm trying to get back to where we were,
Mhm.
a year and a half ago. But I absolutely love that. And talking about learning and your brain, when you're up, really high and you're about ready to do some sort of drop, you're fully focused. So there's no distraction. And I find that it's important to have those times in your
Mhm.
week as well, when you can really be fully present and fully focused. And that does it for me.
Do you find yourself able to translate that moment of intense and unadulterated focus from your free time into your like work time?
Not as well as I'd like.
Okay.
Not as well as I'd like. I do some time boxing, and I know certain times that are more like mentally. I feel like I've got more cognitive energy than others. For me, it's late at night, and so I try and maximize that.
Hmm.
But I think we can be so easily distracted with devices and screens. Are you the same way? You're nodding. I wonder if you feel the
I
same.
am definitely I'm very similar. I went through the exercise this past month of going through every app on my phone that isn't work related and just disable the notifications because I feel like it's robbing me of what I truly
Yes.
want to achieve. Like
Yeah.
I get the cheap dopamine hits of like, oh cool, my brain like got to see a couple of like images on my screen from Instagram or whatever, but it
Right.
doesn't have any bearing with my actual goals, my long-term goals. It's just like a cheap temporary thing, and I probably forgotten what I looked at a few minutes later. And
I
like all those
haven't.
Facebook updates, half those people aren't close. I haven't seen them in a while.
Exactly, exactly. Well, there's something on my desk I'll show you, and we did not talk about this ahead of time, so this is not a promotion. This is called a remarkable. Have
Oh
you
yeah,
ever
yeah, I'm familiar with that product. Yeah, yeah.
definitely changed my life. Like,
Huh.
all you can do on this wonderful device with this stylus is capture your thoughts. It does not notify you. It does not sing. It's not. It's not. It's a liquid crystal display with no color. But that is a place where it really helps you focus, and it's just a joy to interact with. So I highly recommend it.
I have some friends who are writers, and they have a laptop specific for writing because it'll take an older computer, and it has effectively no
No.
compute power to do anything complicated. They just say
Yes.
like it doesn't run anything older than like Windows 2000, and it doesn't have Wi-Fi, so there's no Wi-Fi card, and it only
Yes.
works with Ethernet. So you can plug in Ethernet if you want, but for the most part, who really uses Ethernet nowadays? So
Yes.
they're just forced in an offline world to get their ideas onto paper
Yeah.
or word processor.
Yes. I think that the Remarkable is the same thing. You're in an offline, highly focused, but still creative space, and it's sort of sad that we have to, buy devices to help us do that. But I think it is a time where I feel more focused than when the Slack notifications are going off and the meeting reminders are going off for sure. Yeah.
I usually, so my daily routine at the end of the day is usually to look through all the notifications I've yet to address and then like to think about them or work on them in some way. But I decided to like put a pause on it until the next morning. It's just spend an hour each day just walking for an hour.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting how it's affected my mind. Like I feel like I feel very like emotionally light in comparison to where I was like a month ago. Just because I
Hmm.
feel like when you read things, there's usually like whenever you receive an email, like at some level, there's like, oh shoot, there's the burden of wanting to respond. There's a burden of like some task to do. There's some action item that's on my table or my plate, and I feel like for the most part, especially when people are all in the different time zones, anyways, people
Yeah.
get used to waiting for an extra few hours.
Right. Right. I'm getting the sense that you could be like a zero inbox kind of guy. Are you a zero inbox?
Oh, I used to be until I started a business. There's just too many emails. Like there's the notification emails from all of the productivity tools you use. All your teammates are like sending and sharing documents. The only emails I stay on top of are the ones from clients and prospects.
Yeah.
All the internal emails, all the newsletters, those can wait, and sometimes I never just read those. I feel like I used to subscribe to so many newsletters that I had to unsubscribe once I started a business just because I'm so packed in my
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you, since you've read these great books, any productivity hacks in terms of how you structure your day? 'Cause you talked about the walk, and I'm always interested in how
Hmm.
people who have similar pressures of kind of coming in from all sides, how you chunk your day out to make it more sane.
I've tried a bunch of different things. I haven't like chosen one set of practices I want to keep indefinitely yet. Maybe walking for an hour every day is nice for the short term. I just feel like an hour a day is also a lot of time.
Hmm.
But I feel like it takes me roughly an hour to decompress mentally. Like there's a
Hmm.
lot of thoughts in my brain, and you just kind of, at some level, the brain is an emotional being, and it goes wherever it wants to go, and you can kind of guide it, but you really can't tell your brain like don't think about elephants and then not think about elephants. So you have to let it. You just have to let it run its course, and I think walking without like a screen in front of you helps
Hmm.
you like get that time into like okay, that's I have this thought, these are my conclusions on this thought, or this is the action item, and then I can like emotionally archive that
Hmm.
whatever that entity is.
Oh, I like
In
that
terms of,
term, emotionally archive. I like that.
I actually didn't even think of it as a specific term. I just said it on the spot.
Yeah.
In terms of what I do for my mornings, I'm an awful morning person. Like I get up as late as possible. I value sleep, and I think sleep leads to more productivity than trying to get up earlier. I do. There is a book. There's a couple of books that encourage getting up at like 4 or 5 a.m. And those people just operate a different spectrum than myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's kind of unfair. It's back to like introvert and extrovert and what you
Yeah.
should and should do and all that. I know that if I'm going to be in a creative space, it's going to be between 9:30 and midnight. Like I just know that's, and so um, it, 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning does not work. So I feel like in a lot of different things we need to understand the continuum of different people's experiences and what works
Right.
for them, and not try and force them into the best practices. I do think that sleep is important, and I've learned that kind of more over time. But to tell someone that you've got to be your best self before 7 a.m., I'm just like you're no. The short answer is no. That's not possible.
One thing I do, regardless of the time I get up, is I'll set a roughly a 1 hour block in my morning where I ask people just don't interrupt me. I need to organize everything I need for the rest of the day, so the rest of the day is spent efficiently.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I feel like that's been helpful. I really like the idea of. I can't remember what's the name of the framework, but there's like these four quadrants. There's one for like highly urgent, highly important, low
Yes,
urgency, high
it's the
important.
Covey one. It's the Covey one.
Is it getting things done? Is that it? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah.
the GTD method. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I find
Yeah,
that framework pretty useful.
right.
I
And
think
it's
so many things that are unurgent but highly important, and if you neglect them, there is an invisible cost.
exactly. And there's so many things that can draw your attention that are that you think are they're not important, but they're urgent. And if you don't do them, like nothing happens. But we're sort of conditioned. We're conditioned to
Right,
take
right, right.
care of those. Yeah, yeah,
You're right. Like that condition is a good word. Like I feel like there's so many things that are really not. I think we overestimate how urgent things are in our lives.
hmm
I feel like barring life or death situations, most things can kind of wait to some level. Like even if you miss an appointment, you might like make someone angry or whatever, but it's not the end of the world. Like if you, I don't know. Like I feel like I can think of way more important things or more urgent things that are legitimate excuses for why sometimes people miss meetings.
yeah, yeah. But the media doesn't. The media wants you to have that perfectionism, or to sell you another watch or another tool to make sure that you sort of stay within the status quo. Um, I completely agree. And also the concept of time being elastic. Like I appreciated you asked me, do I have a hard stop? But to give some breathing room between events so that if we go over a little bit or we have this fantastic conversation and want to have six more books on the to-do list, there's not just that kind of like guillotine cutoff of,
Mm.
well, our time together is over, and then the lights go out.
Well, there's also future episodes if we ever had a hard stop. There's a lot of guests I have where I was like, oh shoot, I have another meeting soon, but this conversation is going really well, and I want to see them again. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should invent. I think Goodreads did this, but sharing your book list. I feel
hmm
like there's got to be a better way of um, sharing what's been of interest to you than the existing tools. Because you've already given me two that I'm definitely gonna look at. And I want to be able to reciprocate in some way. So we'll have to figure that out offline.
so when I first started, so I started reading nonfiction probably about 2017, and I had a goal of one book per month,
hmm
and that went okay. I was able to hit that goal. In 2018, I had the goal of like hitting 24 books in 12 months, and the year
hmm
after that, I think it was like 36 books in 12 months. Like I feel like I just kept increasing it. And I thought that was a lot until I realized there's literally people out there who read one book per day. I don't know how thoroughly they read it, but I've had both coworkers and colleagues who tell me they're like, oh, they allocate 3 hours to read every day. And I feel like, dang, that's
mm
incredible. Like one, you have to have a lot of free time. three
Yes.
hours is a lot of time. And then also like that's a lot of mental focus, like
Yeah.
to absorb the book thoroughly. Like I think
Yes.
most nonfiction is not that light to read. Like
Exactly.
there's a component where you have to like reflect on what the author says and see how like, it applies to your life or how you might want to apply the lessons there into some like specific application that isn't like
Yeah.
necessarily in your face.
I love the bookmark feature because I go back and listen to those bookmarks.
Mm.
But I'm also a huge fan of like leveling up on the speed. I can't listen at 1.0 anymore. Like it sounds like they're talking in slow motion. Um, but I've only gotten up to like, I don't know, 1.3, 1.4,
Mm.
depending on the author. But that's a great hack that audiobooks give you and regular books. I can only keep my eyes open for so long and go so fast.
So there was a time where I wanted to absorb information at a faster pace. So there's this Chrome plugin called, I think, Video Speed Controller, and YouTube caps out at 2x speed on their native platform, but this plugin allows you to go up to effectively infinite speed. And I started listening on average to like 2.3 to 2.6 speed, and so I realized everything just sounds like a chipmunk.
Yeah, yeah. And it
And I
depends. It depends on the content and
yeah,
the
for sure.
narrator and all that. But it's definitely an option that you can play with. Yeah.
So I guess now that you've spent like a good amount of time, like I'm assuming you spent a lot of like time on Audible. Is that right? Is Audible your platform of choice?
Audible, and I also am a big fan of Overdrive, the
Overdrive. Okay.
library. I think that interface is brilliant and a lot of content. You don't have to, if I've used all my credits in Audible, which isn't that hard to do, then I'll see what I can find on audio on Overdrive.
What advice would you give like a past version of yourself? Call it like I don't know, either 5 or 10 years ago, based on what you've been learning in more recent years.
Sleep is important.
Okay.
Um,
Did you
uh,
neglect sleep for a good chunk of your
oh
life?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, a really big chunk. That whole corporate time was like a sleep deprived time. Um, and it doesn't mean that you are less productive. It just means that you
Yeah.
prioritize sleep over other maybe not as important activities. Um, Also, meditation, even a short amount. I resisted doing meditation for a long time, and
Me
I
too.
think even small amounts, 7 hours of sleep versus six is a big difference. So just with that, like self care, I think there was a time when we were all boasting about how little sleep we got and how mentally exhausted we were and how
Right.
overworked we were, and we weren't really being as productive as we were kidding ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the prioritization that you just said. What can I get rid of? Being a little bit more of a minimalist in terms of like not only things but also things that are cluttering my mind. Um, and that's when some of the breakthroughs happen. And I think our my business, our company, we've gotten more clear. We've had more success out of that. Kind of taking a more simplistic view than trying to do everything at once or exploring every single avenue. Like really being intentional um, is the advice I would give my former self. How
You
about
mentioned
you?
earlier that you're a former engineer, right?
Yes.
I really
Yes.
like the Unix principle in terms of like programming, where each program is supposed to do one thing, a very simple thing, very, very well. Because
Yes.
that's how like any large complex system needs to be run. Like you need to have a small component that's highly reliable that does one thing well. Like you don't
Yes.
really want a jack of all trades in every job position just
Mm-hmm.
because it works maybe temporarily under certain conditions, but indefinitely specialists exist for a reason. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And also recognizing what you can do well, and there's certain tasks that, so I say with being a CEO that I really don't like, but there are other people, there's
Yeah.
other people that we surround ourselves with that happen to love accounting and they do it well.
Mm.
They do it more efficiently than I will ever do it because I just kind of grit my teeth. So just because you can do something or understand it is different than finding someone who finds joy in that activity and surrounding yourself with all those different skills. So that's another thing that I would probably say is just because you can do it all or try to do it all, find other people that find joy in all these different tasks, and everything's going to run a lot more smoothly. Everyone's going to be a lot more happy.
So we talked to a lot of founders, and I noticed that there's this general trend that a lot of founders, at one stage of their entrepreneurial journey, they struggle to delegate. Do you find yourself to be in that category?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I went from having this team of a lot of people, and I could delegate anything I wanted
Hmm.
to you look around and you're like, there's no one to delegate this task to. So now what happens? But you can get, not only creative but also prioritize.
Mm.
Someone said you don't have, you're not active on Twitter. Like I've determined that posting on Twitter is not helping our business. So you're right. We have an account, but it's dormant right now. And when at the right time with the right people or whatever, then we'll become more active. We find LinkedIn to be more helpful, just as an example. So that prioritization number one, and then finding those that find the joy in the tasks that you don't like to do. That's okay. It doesn't make you less of a founder. That
Mhm.
I didn't. I don't. I have someone review our contracts, and I happen to love our legal resource. um, I think there can be a little bit of pride of if I don't understand it all, I don't do it all, then I'm not successful. But you need to do what's the most important and strategic for your organization, and then get help. That's it's definitely okay. And the people that are killing it, they've definitely figured out ways to get help.
So at Pagedip, who was your first hire, and how did you know that that was the role you wanted to hire for, or first batch
Um,
of hires if there was multiple?
the first hire was a brilliant developer who's still with us,
Nice.
and we put this kind of weird ad out and thought, who's gonna say yes to this job?
Okay.
It's and it just turned out to be the perfect fit, and now he's sort of like head of all of our technology and
Hmm.
architecture. um, I think you need the someone that cares about the product, someone that cares about the business, um, and and people that care about the customer. And you can't shortcut. You don't have a business if you don't have all three of those things.
Right.
And so we want to get product right, get that right first. So that was the first hire. I was slow to the draw in terms of marketing and sales, and in hindsight, I wish that we'd brought that those resources on earlier. And I think that's a common fallacy for tech founders of, oh, it works great. Everyone's going to see that and want to buy it. Yeah. To a point. And then when you really want to scale, you've got to do those things well. So, yeah.
Do you have a background, or do you have friends that you turn to for expertise in sales and marketing, or do you just go straight to hiring like an expert or consultant?
We leaned a lot on our board and our advisors at first, and it's a hard thing to. I feel like I love technology and I love talking to technical people, and so it seemed not easy, but I understood the process of hiring technical talent. I'd never been in a marketing role. I never managed marketing people, and I'd never done marketing, and so getting some advice from people that had either been in those roles or hired was important, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you can be lured into a path or working with individuals that aren't the best fit. So and I've had people, non-technical founders say, how do you interview developers? How do you understand if they're the right fit? Like, oh, that seems like it comes naturally.
Second nature,
it's just what you know, right? So we definitely leaned on mentors, advisors on our board to draw from their experiences. And I talked to other founders, and founders will all tell you, the stories, the hardships, because we want to. I think it's definitely in contrast to entrepreneurship, in contrast to larger businesses. We really want everyone to succeed. I'm not competing with you, so I'm willing to share that bad experience with the design agency that I had because I didn't know any better, and save you some time. I'm happy to do that.
Are you part of any official founder communities?
There's two groups in Denver that one mastermind group and one CEO group that I am a part of, and it's a great place to not only get. I think it's less about getting advice, but also giving back and helping other people with whatever they're working through. It can be very isolating to be a CEO and to start a company and be in a small organization. So I think it's really important for your mental health, but also just to be able to share. Again, if I could make everyone's life a little bit easier or avoid a pitfall, I'm all for it. So those are some places that you can do it. How about you?
And is it? I think so. The reason I asked the question is I think I'm at the earlier stage of my journey, and I'm trying to either look for one that I think is good or just to build it myself. Because one of the things I like about communities is the fact that it's a representation of who you are, and you present yourself as you are. And I think if I plan to be in the entrepreneurship space for the next, if I'm alive in 50 years, I would love to still be an entrepreneur in 50 years. And so I feel like it makes a lot of sense when I like the concept of beginning with the end in mind. So I feel like it's an idea I've toyed with, but I feel like, so this show is technically like a spawn off from our previous business. So if we create a community, it would be a spawn off of this show. And then maybe I'm just getting too far and getting too distracted. So I'm afraid of the shiny object syndrome, where like there's so many great ideas out there, but you can only execute on a few. So I figured I'd throw the question out there.
Yeah. And I didn't join, to be completely transparent. I didn't join a group like that until later in my entrepreneurial journey. But I do see maybe more shrewd founders that start there, and I think they've got it right. I think that it's never too early to start, even if you are considering or contemplating a business. There's so much richness to share in those groups. You don't have to feel like, oh, if I haven't made $5 million yet, I shouldn't join a group. That's not the case at all.
Is that where you found your mentors?
We found a lot of our mentors through. I'm not sure if you ever heard of the CU New Venture Challenge. University here does they have a great entrepreneurial program. We got involved in it kind of in the earlier days, and we still keep in touch with some of those mentors. Our very first angel investor came from that environment. So there's just a great entrepreneurial community here in Boulder, and that ecosystem is where we've drawn from a lot of mentors. Also, Bloodstone Entrepreneur Network. I think there's a lot in Houston as well.
Hmm.
So, and they're just everyone's just more than happy to help. That's the great thing. They're really genuinely interested in your success, and they just figure you'll pay it to
The
the
next
next batch.
generation.
Yeah.
Right, right. I think that's one of the coolest parts about being an entrepreneur. I think more so than any other community I've seen, there's a strong desire to want to elevate the next generation.
Yes.
Because I think
Yes.
at some point everyone realizes that everyone's been given a leg up by just knowing the right person at the right time, and then having that person instill education, instill knowledge, instill opportunities
Hmm.
that led them to be where they are today.
Yeah. I
I
still
also think
credit
it's
I still credit my freshman high school math teacher for me being an
hmm.
engineer. Like, you never know what kind of impact you can have, but thanks to him, I loved calculus and I became an engineer. If hadn't had Mr. Orr's class, I don't know. I don't know what job I would have had.
Teachers are an incredible profession. Like I have had so many influential teachers from, I guess I can't really remember high school, sorry, middle school, but high school onward for sure. I remember a bunch of my teachers, and they were inspirational for me to want to learn computer science and then follow that path for my career, and that I guess led me to where I am today.
Yeah.
I could have easily been on a different path if I just had different teachers, and I think
Hmm.
it's incredible, and I think it's unfortunate that the United States doesn't compensate
They're
teachers as well as other nations.
underappreciated.
For
They're
sure, for
absolutely
sure.
underappreciated.
Yeah. I think it's a there's so many things that need to be changed in terms of budgeting, but that said, I'm not a politician. I have no idea what it takes to make those changes. Cool. Well, thank you for your time. I just had one final question.
Okay.
Um, what's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you?
I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, so I'm the only Sherisse Hawkins spelled the way my name is spelled on LinkedIn, and I welcome connections, and I also welcome any ways that I can help others and pay back. I may not be able to answer you in one day, but I really take it seriously and try to respond to everybody that reaches out to me on LinkedIn.